something new, that to me, after having worked several years with history books and research papers and all this sort of thing, it was very enticing to me. So learning new things is great, and what better field, as you all may know, than web development or software in general, than a field that keeps on giving you things to learn, right? I mean, the technology evolves so fast, you'll never reach the end of the line there. Let's just put it that way. So now I want to cover what are basically the three main options today when it comes to learning web development. I want to go into basically the pros and cons of each, and of course, my approach is going to be one individual's approach, but hopefully you can glean something from how I approach this and what I feel is probably the best method by which to learn web development. So when I started my journey, I thought, as many people do, even to this day and age, that the only way to get into a computer-related field is to get a degree in computer science. So that's exactly what I did. I actually re-enrolled in my alma mater. I graduated from Florida Atlantic University down here in Boca. I actually re-enrolled in some computer science classes, although even before that I had to take some prerequisites in physics and calculus and some things there. But through my endeavors, I got to the point where I was learning to program in C and C++. I was also learning some logic design, learning some discrete mathematics, all these sort of fun computer science concepts. And part of what made me pull away from that was the feeling that I wasn't learning what was entirely applicable in the here and now. I wanted that hands-on experience. I wanted something where I could start creating. And I'll get into a little bit more of that in just a moment. But it led me to move to search online. Okay, what better place than to search through YouTube, search through Google, and find some resources that can help you learn to code. So I'll go over a few of the resources I used. I've heard a few of you all here tonight mention a couple of them, so I'm glad to hear that I've had a similar experience and we can kind of go over some of those ideas. And then finally, I came upon this concept of a coding boot camp. Okay, and that ultimately is what led me to today. I started a coding boot camp about 6 months ago. I'm actually just finishing mine up, and that was the program that really gave me the combination of both of these first two options that I was looking for. It really helped motivate me to learn. So I'll go through each of these options and kind of show you my trajectory, and also hopefully give you a sense of some of the pros and cons to each approach. So first, it was back to school, kind of like Billy Madison. Went back into the computer science classrooms. I was on the same campus I had been before. It was kind of an interesting, nostalgic experience. But that being said, I quickly noticed some of the things I liked about being in school. Again, hey, I'm someone who says I like to learn. So some people hear school and they, run away. But to me, it was actually kind of cool to be able to go back into the classroom. So I really appreciated the structure of having a professor, someone who went as far as to get their PhD in the field of computer science. Also, as I mentioned, I was learning things like logic design and discrete math and things like that that seemed kind of broad and out there, but at the same time, I appreciated that it was giving me foundational skills. It was a very comprehensive approach to learning this field, and I am of that mindset that I do like to learn everything about something. I'm not someone who just wants to learn enough to, kind of be dangerous with the technology and then kind of mess around. I do actually appreciate the comprehensive knowledge that a computer science program provides. In addition to that, it's always wonderful to have colleagues with you learning, okay? A huge benefit of going to school for computer science is that you have classmates to talk to, you have TAs to help. At colleges now I see that they have learning labs specifically designed to help you with problems, and they're really putting a lot of effort into giving students as much assistance as possible. So definitely a benefit amongst the computer science classes. And finally, there's some excellent career assistance, right? You have job fairs that come to the school, you have internships that can be facilitated. So there are some definite advantages to going the computer science route. However, what drove me away from this route, especially, and I'll emphasize this point, that I am someone who had already been through college, okay? All of these factors may be very important, and especially someone who hasn't gone to college might find them very beneficial. But to me personally, I felt that I needed a little bit of a quicker route. So that's where these cons come in on my side. And that is, the curriculum is very broad. I didn't see much hands-on experience. I wasn't building entire programs with anything. I did, however, learn how to build a circuit board in Logic Design. I sat there for 12 hours and built this little thing with wires and stuff. Again, totally cool. I'm not knocking it at all, but it was a much slower progression. I didn't see that kind of fruits of my labor that I would have liked to have seen. And that leads into the third con over here, which is it's rather time consuming. Again, if you're going to college anyway, what better field to study than computer science? But for someone such as myself, I didn't feel that I had, 2 to 3 years minimum going to school part-time, that is, to really spend on this. And finally, no pun intended on spend, but it comes up here, which is that it's rather expensive, right? It's hard to get around the fact that college is an expensive endeavor, and although I could afford it semester by semester going part-time, that kind of becomes something that you want to look into other options, and maybe there's something else available for you. So that led me to my next approach, which was to look at some of the online resources that were available. So I put a couple examples up here. I think these are the most common. I would hear these constantly online. Free Code Camp, Codecademy, okay? Some of the first in their field to do this. And is there anyone who's unfamiliar with these types of online resources when I say Codecademy or Free Code Camp? Are we all aware of these? Okay, so essentially we know that they are well-designed, quick ways to get your hands straight into the code, okay? So right off the bat, a few of the pros, as opposed to computer science, you're learning the latest technology. You are learning JavaScript, you're learning frameworks right off the bat. You can learn virtually any language you want. You can pick Python, PHP, anything. So it is a much different approach than computer science. It's also much quicker to get through these programs. I mean, you can effectively complete an entire course in a day as compared to a semester, okay? I'll throw in the added benefit that you don't have exams at the end, so that's also wonderful, right? But really, you're getting the hands-on experience. That's what really turned me onto these types of resources, is I could actually get in there, code up something, and see the results of it immediately, okay? This isn't something that you tend to find in the computer science route that might be very enticing to a lot of us. And it goes without saying that these resources being free is a huge advantage, okay? And one of the signs of how the state of coding is today, that there are so many resources offered for free. People have, put in the labor out of the goodness of their hearts to, give us all of these resources, and it's definitely worthwhile to at least dip your foot in if you haven't already. Now the cons to this, okay, why I wasn't entirely satisfied. These exercises are rather surface level, okay? You're still not building entire projects. And in fact, by the time I had gotten through a lot of these courses, I had not so much as even opened a project locally on my own machine. So something like that, I'll be talking about that in a moment too, about how that can be daunting in itself. It's very easy when you have a padded environment. Okay, and what I mean by that is they've got everything set up for you. All you do is follow instructions, type a little bit of code in, click, run, and there you have it. It either works or it doesn't, right? But that's not really indicative of what programming is really like, okay? When you don't have the debugging to go through, when you don't have all of these extra steps that, we have a love-hate relationship with, I guess, as coders. You just kind of get this false sense of security that really all it is in the programming, and I definitely wanted the full experience. Finally, you have a little bit of an inconsistent structure with some of these programs. I found myself learning one step ahead of another and not really knowing why. I'll just give one example, which was Free Code Camp. You learn a lot of things and you're using Bootstrap classes right out of the bat. And I didn't even know what Bootstrap was. I actually wrote one of my first blog posts about how empowering it was just to learn what Bootstrap was and to find it so simple after seeing it as like this daunting thing. Like I literally thought it was like another programming language. Like a lot of us when we start out, we think every new technology you learn is going to be some huge endeavor. And without the full-on explanation of how each of these things work, it's far less efficient than it otherwise would be than if you're learning it in a practical manner. Okay? And finally, you don't have the assistance that you have with either computer science or with the boot camp, as I'll mention in a moment. You know, of course you have online forums and all these things to use, but you don't have someone that's right there to talk it over with, or a mentor or anything of that sort. And I'll mention just as an aside here, if anyone hasn't, willing to bet my life we've all heard of YouTube, but maybe someone, if you haven't heard of a resource called Udemy, this is another supplemental resource that I use, just to kind of give a middle route here, that YouTube, of course, we know we can find tutorials on just about anything. I mean, forget coding, you can build a wooden chair from scratch if you want on tutorials on YouTube. And you can find explanation of concepts, you can find full lectures. I mean, there are people that upload computer science classes right there on YouTube. So you can get the best of both worlds there. But Udemy was actually a resource that I used and I still use as a supplemental resource. And the reason is because Udemy actually has structured courses. They're in a lecture format, so it's very similar to YouTube. You're watching short, usually like 5-minute lectures on different concepts, and they give you exercises to code along with. So you almost get an online classroom sort of feel. Secondly, you have assistance with Udemy classes. You have the actual teacher who designed the course is always there to answer in Q&A sessions. There's also a forum where you can post, and people will be there to help. And although these aren't entirely free, and it may be a little daunting when you log onto the page and see that it's several $100s for a course, I found that if you just wait it out, they almost always have a sale where those courses will go down to about $10. Okay, so that now is a life hack for you all. Okay, if you didn't already know, it's like shopping at Kohl's, right? You never pay full price. Okay, everything's on a discount. So Udemy, I definitely think whether you go any of these routes, I think they can be incredibly helpful because you have knowledgeable people in the field who have taken the time to really design a course that gives you the full package. Okay, so where I finally ended up was in Coding Bootcamp, okay? Now, is there anyone here who doesn't know what a Coding Bootcamp is? Has ever heard of this term? Okay.
Anybody that knows what it is? Same answer.
Okay.
Should be logical.
Well, you're about to hear either a reiteration or perhaps a little bit more of a specific example about one, because that's what I ended up doing. I actually shopped around quite a bit when it came to coding boot camps. I heard about these programs. They are anywhere from 2 to 6 months long. They're supposed to teach you to be a full stack developer, right? And forgive me, veterans, I'm sure you're like eye rolling right now, like, yeah, right. But that is what they promise you anyway. And so the idea is that you're going to at least learn a full stack in web development. And as a new developer, half the time you're like, okay, you hear the word full stack enough, you just think that's what you need to learn, so you just go for it, okay? But it is important to do your research on these things, and I looked into a few different ones. There are options where you actually go to a physical location, you live on campus sometimes, or just rent a place for a few months, and you're there 40 hours a week, okay? It becomes a full-time job, and they'll tell you 2-3 months later, you're gonna know all this stuff, okay? That wasn't quite the position I was in once again. However, I looked at other options and I saw that there were more flexible programs, okay? I specifically chose one that was online. It was designed to be part-time, so you work about 20 hours a week, and you're able to complete this program in 6 months. So it makes sense, it's half the time each week, but takes about twice as long. And from my own personal take on this, to me that sounds better in the sense that even if you can learn it in half the time, in a couple of months, to me it seems, especially from maybe it's the teacher side of me, but being able to absorb the material over 6 months as opposed to 2 or 3 can be very helpful in that sense as well. So just from my own perspective. Now there are absolutely people out there that can put the time in and devote themselves, and that can be a huge advantage to get it done in a much quicker time, but just my own personal situation led me towards a more flexible option. And then of course the thing that really pulls us in with boot camps is that they are teaching the latest technologies when they're doing this, okay? I can't tell you how many different websites I sifted through about, okay, is this the mean stack, is this the MERN stack, is this the LAMP stack, is this the, whatever, okay? You hardly even know what these terms mean, and yet you're supposed to kind of come up with this decision about what you want to code in, okay? Essentially the stack you want to learn. And a couple of hints there is, of course, it's always good to look at the job market in your area, something none of these boot camps tended to display. It was just kind of like, hey, learn the newest thing. And once again, veterans, perhaps you already know this quite well, that the newest thing is not always the thing that does the job the best, or is not the most applicable in your area. What company is just going to completely flip over to MERN stack just because it's the newest thing, right? So the program I actually ended up with was called Thinkful, okay? And it is this is by no means an endorsement, by the way. I was not paid to speak on behalf of this, but I will say that it was the route I was looking for, okay? It was an online program designed to be 6 months long. It is designed on the MERN stack, okay? You actually have a view right here of what the actual different facets of the curricula are.
Wow.
And you might wonder, okay, well, if it's online, how exactly do you learn? Is it any different than Udemy, where you're just watching lectures and going through a course? And the answer is yes, it's quite a bit different. I was actually surprised at this in the beginning, and again, this might turn many people away, but the majority of the curriculum is actually reading still, okay? I don't know about you all, but I was actually surprised when I found that out. I thought, well, this is online, everything's the highest, newest technology, they're just gonna show videos of it all, right? Just like YouTube. And I was surprised to learn that actually you're reading through probably 90% of the curriculum. Where the actual interaction comes in is that you are assigned a mentor, okay? And you actually have sessions 3 times per week. They're 1-hour sessions. And that's where you can go over ideas. You can do some extra coding drills. You can ask questions. You can do anything. But in the meantime, you're reading through the curriculum. Each different section, you have some coding exercises, drills as they call them. And then over the course of this 6 months, you actually have 3 major projects they call capstones. So you do your first capstone when you get to asynchronous client-side aspects, and so you deal with using requests to an API and back and forth and things like that. Once you get past the node part of this course, then you build a server-side app. And then finally, you actually learn the front-end framework. As I mentioned, the R of the MERN stack, as I keep referring to it, is React. So you learn React, and you build a full-stack app. Okay? So, by the way, I've used that term a couple times as well. Is anyone not familiar with the stacks I mentioned? Mean, MERN? Anyone unfamiliar with those terms? So we're talking Mongo, Express, React, and Node. Okay, just so we're all clear on that. And finally, once you've learned all of those technologies, well, actually, I'll point out the other aspect that's helpful, which is you have a community. Thinkful, last time I checked, had about 3,000 plus members, and it seems to me that they're continually growing. But you have Slack channel, to be on and contact people. You have Q&A sessions that are set up, multiple sessions a day, so you can go in and actually get help from one of the mentors who is or might not be your own mentor, but you can ask questions. So all in all, you have a number of different resources at your disposal. I myself have actually just completed my full stack capstone, my final capstone, hopefully time permitting. I can show you all that tonight. I actually think it can help. It was designed with a problem I had, which is looking for coding jobs, and I hope that it can help some of you as well, since we're all, or many of us at least, are in this kind of same boat.
Nice.
Now, I pose the pros and cons in this case, and again, this is my own perspective, so I happen to come out in favor of boot camps. I think you could say that I would agree, following my own trajectory, that this is probably the best method I have to learn in this day and age. So even some of the cons can seem like pros, okay? And what do I mean? Well, it is a lot of material you're learning in 6 months. Double that if you're going for 3 months. I've watched videos and heard of people going to the other immersive boot camps where they learn very quickly, and there's no doubt about it, okay? You're supposed to learn an entire web stack in this amount of time. That can also be obviously good. You can save a lot of time. You are not beholden to going multiple semesters in a computer science program, so that can be helpful. Secondly, in my case, this is an online program, so there are certain pitfalls to that, right? One being that you don't have someone looking over your shoulder at your code, you don't have someone to speak to face, and especially when it comes to troubleshooting, that can be a problem. Okay, so also consider that there are, hours spent trying to debug problems, and of course your online is your only resource, and you don't have someone there to really help you out with that. Once again, that can be a pro in the sense that you are forced to sink or swim in a lot of cases, and you really have to get it figured out. And lastly, the cost. Once again, I would put it in between free and computer science degree. So Thinkful is in the range of 8,000 to 10,000. Other boot camps go as high as 20,000. I definitely looked at some that were much more expensive than that. But how can that possibly be a pro? Well, when you have that much riding on the line and you've invested that much in this program, you can be sure that you're really going to put the effort in. So those are just some aspects there, but make no bones about it, you are cranking it up to 11, okay? You are really focused on this, and the intent is to get through all of this knowledge, and I stand before you as my own example that it is quite amazing thinking about what I know standing here today as I did maybe the first meetup I came to before I had even learned Node or any of that sort of thing. So you'd be surprised how much you can learn in this amount of time. Okay, so now here's where we get to the split part, okay? And what I mean is, here are some things that I came into contact with that can both be kind of heads up to some of the newer developers amongst us. Maybe some of you had similar experiences. And also the veterans. Maybe this will help give you some perspective on, maybe it'll be laughable. Well, how could you possibly find Git difficult? Ha ha ha, you can't learn Git. But quite honestly, that's one of the things as my examples of being one of these things that can really be a roadblock to learning when it doesn't need to be. So, as a programmer in 2018, we are faced with endless amounts of choices, okay? Forget, what stack you want to learn. Let's just talk about what first language you want to learn. I said, in my experience, I learned C and then C++, and I would go online and think that I was doomed to failure because no one uses C and C++. I know I can hear the veterans already moaning about that as well. But let alone any other language. Oh, do you learn PHP, Python? Oh, this one is all the rage. And I just give you one example from a while back about these types of graphs you'll see, and the most highest number of GitHub repos means that this is the language, learn JavaScript. I was looking at boot camps right around the time when everyone was saying, oh my gosh, we're learning Ruby in this boot camp. And then I was just in time to hear that Ruby was on the decline, and oh my gosh, don't even learn Ruby, it's a waste of time. And then finally, of course, as you can imagine, people will say, no, these things come and go, the market ebbs and flows, there are different uses for everything. So just understand that from a newcomer's perspective, maybe some of you experience something similar to this, it is one hectic world out there when you're trying to make these decisions that are going to lock you into a language. And if there's one thing I can kind of give as a broad theme about this whole talk, or this portion of the talk anyway, is that it is so much more important to learn the concepts, to learn the basic ideas, and whatever language you learn first, it will be imminently easier to learn the next language once you already have a good foothold, okay? So yes, I learned C and C++, and yes, I think that was incredibly valuable to learn those things before I started learning JavaScript, before I learned any web development, okay? So no knowledge is gonna harm you. Maybe that's just the teacher in me, but trust me, no knowledge will harm you. Don't be fearful of these things, and moreover, don't let them be a roadblock to stopping yourself from learning something or feeling like you're not getting far enough. So just a couple of the options. These may seem laughable to many of us, but honestly, I seriously thought it was so important which text editor I used. I had used Visual Studio when I was in computer science classes. Now everyone's telling me I need to use Atom, I need to use Sublime. You know, the list goes on. Notepad++. Some I hadn't even heard of at the time. So once again, this is not nearly as important as it's made out to be out there on the internet. And finally, operating system. I stand before you now, I can say proudly, with not a Macintosh computer, okay? I literally was led to believe that anything but a Mac in this day and age was just, don't even bring it by, okay? This is just unacceptable in our day and age. Windows is a death sentence, okay? And I can tell you with certainty now that Windows is not a death sentence. Okay, I've done this entire program using Windows. I've always been Windows, not opposed to Mac by any stretch of the imagination, but it's definitely not what it's made out to be online. Now, I want to quickly jump. I have a link here, but I should have, yes. Okay, so I want to actually show you, just get off this here.
Oh, we got a hint. We're back.
Okay, so this is actually an interesting resource that I found, and it is designed by someone who is actually a computer science student and created it for his professor. And it's funny because this, I was going to originally say that it's updated every so often. It actually was just updated like a day or two ago as I was looking back at it before I gave this presentation. And what this is essentially the roadmap, right, for learning web development in 2018. So just to give everyone a sense of what I mean when we're faced with decisions, and it can be a little bit daunting to, you know, be faced with all of these things. This is just the front end portion that I'm looking at right at the moment, but he does have sections for back end and DevOps. So you look at this, and of course, okay, you need to learn all the basics on this side, your Git, you know, HTTP, and probably, you know, async requests and all the sorts of general knowledge. Then you come to the front end, and I'll give you one example of how this, or I'll just say this. Keep in mind, notice how it says jQuery is optional?
Can you control plus it? Yeah.
Keep in mind that this says jQuery optional, because that's just one of the examples that I have heard back and forth about learning, okay? In the program I learned jQuery, and then recently I've been seeing a theme about going back to vanilla.js. No one uses jQuery anymore, but again, I'm a little bit more knowledgeable now. I take that with a grain of salt. You know, there is such a thing as legacy code. There are such things as trends. Not everything is cut and dry. But just keep that in mind, because I'm going to show that.
But that was Jeremy that said that.
Yeah, vanilla.js for the win.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got people
Definitive answer.
who
Yeah.
have taken sides
But it goes back
in
and
this
forth.
debate. And so you've got, this actually used to be a lot messier. I like how he's cleaned this up and given numbers and descriptions. And he even gives us a little tip of the hat here when he says, once you learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript, you're a good portion of the way through, you do have something valuable, because once again, looking at a lot of these job postings and things like that, it doesn't seem that way, right? You look at a job posting and HTML, CSS, and JavaScript probably aren't even in there. It's just a given, and you need to know 10 other technologies or languages or something like that, right? So just knowing that even that is, not the full story, and that you can have valuable skills as you go through, I found personally very valuable. But just so you get a sense as you go through here, you have basically a theme that I noticed learning web development is that every time you learn one new language or one new technology, there's inevitably 3 to 5 other ones that go off with it, okay? You can't just learn CSS, now you need to learn preprocessors, and you need to learn frameworks, and you need to learn all these other sorts of things. And one of the things that really helped me to put that into perspective is just realizing that the way technology works is that just like languages, no one language can do everything the best, okay, despite what some people may tell you. The idea here is that every piece of this puzzle that you're learning probably just does one thing really well, or it's just meant to help you do another thing really well. So a preprocessor is just that. It's supposed to make it simpler to write CSS and allow you a little bit of additional functionality. When you learn something like Webpack, that was another thing that came up when I was learning React. Okay, you have certain build tools, and I remember hearing these terms and thinking like, geez, I need to learn this whole technology just to handle this new language. And remember, it might be as simple as an npm install command, okay, and setting something up that really helps you facilitate making things. And I give you probably no better example than something like create React app. If anyone knows what that is, it's a wonderful script that will allow you to, pardon the pun, but bootstrap React applications very quickly. So a lot of these tools are immensely helpful. Okay, so rather than looking at a lot of these things as, oh my gosh, how much stuff I have to learn, think about it as once you learn something, and especially learning it from the basic level, you can learn things that add on to it and make it that much easier, okay? And I personally am a huge fan of learning the basics first. So I'm with Jeremy when he says vanilla JavaScript, and then learn the library or the framework that's gonna help you out with that later. And that's a whole other topic for discussion of which of these frameworks you wanna learn. There are wars going on over this stuff. But just so we get a sense of all of these different technologies, and perhaps some of the veterans can vouch for me when I say that it probably didn't look as much like this 10 or 15 years ago.
No, you had 3 options.
That's right. Wasn't even PHP, it was just PH.
Wow. And if you notice here, this is another perfect example. This is, of course, the back end. This is actually what the front end used to look like in his design. But you notice here, of course, every option, right? And you have to choose the right one, or else what are you doing with your life, apparently? So remember, you learn one of these, it's never going to hurt you, okay? At most, you learned a new language that you end up needing a different one for a job, but also it's immensely helpful to learn the skills. And if anyone would like this resource, of course, I can give it to you afterward. This is I'll put it in Slack, absolutely. So this is Kamran Ahmed is the person who designed this, and it's usually, I think, the first thing that comes up when you.
You did?
I could.
Yes, please.
You're on.
Excellent. Thank you. So it's usually the first thing that comes up when you search the roadmap, but excellent. We'll get that out to you.
So it's on the developer channel, the Palm Beach Tech Slack. Sorry to interrupt.
Perfect. No, thank you very much. Another constant theme. So goes right along with this idea of what language you choose to learn and did you choose the right one. The latest and greatest, or not so great. it's hard to tell, but it's always advertised as if it is the latest and greatest, and you need to know this new thing, okay? So what I mean are things like learning a piece of technology. I just mentioned that I'm a huge fan of learning the base technology and then adding on from there. It's one of the things I didn't like about, for example, the free online resources, just throwing Bootstrap and other things at you before you know what they are. I learned from learning React, learning Redux, because another thing you do in the boot camp is actually do mock interviews. And one of the questions I got was, why did you decide to use Redux on your capstone project? And while I feel that I came up with a fairly good answer, I don't know that it's always necessary for every project. And furthermore, it's important if you're going to use one of these technologies that you should probably know why you're using it, okay? And so, not to go into the details there and spend too much more time talking about what Redux is and things of that nature, but just so everyone is aware, the idea of learning every facet of a language, every new library that comes out, and without rhyme or reason, makes it far more difficult to understand its purpose. Another thing we come upon that's on a much broader scale, okay? Programming paradigms. I started learning programming and everything was about object-oriented when you're learning C++ and then learning a little bit of Java and things of this nature. But I started hearing this buzzword that everything needed to be functional programming, right? And well, it depends on who you're talking with, okay? Jeremy and Damien interviewed someone on their podcast. It was an excellent talk they had with someone who was very big into the functional programming world. And some of us can get a hint of it. We can understand, oh, pure functions, okay, so different way of memory management and so forth. But understand that when we're faced with these different paradigms and we don't know, once again, the reason, the greater context of why one is better, it can end up just being more confusing than is necessary. So again, I'll say don't get too bogged down with hearing all these latest buzzwords and what the new paradigms are, because again, things have been around for years and they're not going anywhere, and once something really has some steam, then you'll be able to learn it that much easier, knowing some foundational concepts yourself. And just another quick example here I noticed. In the boot camp I took, everything was in ES6, okay? ECMAScript, etc., the latest version of JavaScript, for anyone who's unaware. And I had started out learning original JavaScript, right, in a lot of the free online resources. So I was used to seeing something like this, and spent 20 minutes trying to debug this, which many of you look at and you're probably laughing to yourself because it's so ridiculous and obvious probably that I could have either put brackets there and used a return statement, or I could have just left the something. And add to that factors like when you want to do a .map method or something like that, and you don't have the proper number of parentheses after it, and it just looks like it's something that should work, and it doesn't, and it becomes very difficult to debug. So understand also that we're learning kind of two things at once. Instead of learning things, and I'll actually go to this next point because that goes right hand in hand with this. Instead of learning things in chronological order, a lot of the times we're just learning like twice as much stuff, and it's not always clear which occasion we're supposed to use which, okay? And another prime example, I mentioned the jQuery thing, right? Many of us probably learn jQuery as a common library. When you learn JavaScript, hey, what easier way to teach asynchronous calls than using .ajax, okay? And I literally got to my last project before I had even heard of either of these other options, okay? So asynchronous calls as a concept, again, it can be very simple to learn how that works, but when you're thrust with multiple options, or you're fed only one option and then building a project without jQuery, it becomes very problematic. So once again, key theme here is always focus on learning the concepts and don't get too bogged down in exactly how the code is written itself. Don't focus on the syntax, focus on the concept. And you might think, Okay, well, any developer should know, go straight to the documentation. If you don't know how to use an API, right? Okay, fetch API, what's that? Go to the docs, go to MDN, go to some resource that will teach you this. And just saying because I've been there, I don't know if any of you all have been there as well, but when you're sifting through the documentation, sometimes it almost seems more technical and more difficult to learn. So, once again, conceptual knowledge will save the day here. If you know what you need to do and you can parse out what parameters you need and things like that, it becomes much easier to learn. And finally, I'll give this note of warning from my own experience as well. I was building a project with NVD3. And I went back and was looking at a lot of the original D3 documentation. And if anyone is familiar with those technologies, D3 is meant to display data and things of that nature. A lot of those same methods that were from 2014, even 2015, had since been deprecated. And I was sitting there, spending a lot of time trying to get them to work and wondering why they weren't working. Okay, so it's important, even if it's something as simple as when you go on Stack Overflow, note the date of the posts. We get into this mode where a lot of times we just go to Google, type something in, the first option that pops up, hey, someone answered it, awesome. And believe me, I commend beyond all belief the community for doing all of that. It's so awesome. But just keep in mind that as quickly as you can search for this stuff, technology changes, and it's always important to note which version you're learning or whether or not that methodology still exists. And finally, this one is very similar to the way I teach my high school students. You get a high school student to write a paper, and the last thing they want to do is write a paper and then have to edit it. What do they all want to do? They want to write a paper from start to finish, turn it in, done. Okay? Forget editing. A lot of times, new coders can feel like this, and a lot of frustration can build over this idea of refactoring code. Okay? Because we all probably learn simpler ways to write things, right? Your typical for loop before you get into for each and all these other options, okay? So I give you one example that I did on a website called Code Wars. It was a simple exercise, count the number of duplicate, I think it was words in this case, or characters, I'm sorry, in a string of text. And I go in, and believe me, at this point, I felt pretty impressed with myself for being able to pull that off. I was like, all right, I got it down. Then I go into some of the other solutions, and I see something that looks like this, done in one line, okay? But especially for you veterans out there, realize that a lot of times, the simpler option to you, the methods that just pop into your head, or the things that automatically handle certain things, are not as intuitive for newcomers. Okay, so a lot of times I've looked at code like this and just thought, wow, why am I even trying if I have to write this when it can be done that simple? Sometimes you feel foolish, but just remember that there's a lot of value in learning how these things are actually coded out rather than always falling back to the method that's going to take care of it. Okay.
Another thing to note too, just to second what you were saying, it's like at some point, readability is a big factor as well. It's like, even as a veteran, it's like I wouldn't be able to figure out what the bottom thing is doing, whereas the top is more explicit. Even though it's more code, it's accomplishing the same thing. I might even go for the top one versus the lower one, because thinking of myself 6 months from now, like, the hell was I dealing with this? Like, what is this for? It's like, and the bottom one leans more toward small error being having a huge effect on your script, versus the top one where it's like I can go to line 7 and be like, oh, I fat fingered something there, or I added extra character somewhere. So readability. Think of yourself in the future, not necessarily right now as well, because a lot of times you are going to be looking at your code later on in life and be like, who the hell did this? And you realize it was you.
Are you using regex there in the bottom right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
That stuff's crazy, man.
Mm-hmm.
You're right.
Regular expressions?
Yeah.
See, and I mean, not not just regex, but a lot of those, panacea, as people want to consider them, technologies that are just meant to solve like this whole problem, And definitely that's an awesome point that Jeremy just brought up, which is, and points for the newbie here, that sometimes, yeah, writing it out and doing it in a more logical fashion can be beneficial. So it's funny because when I did a lot of these first exercises, I would just immediately see the better way to do it, and I would always feel like, man, I just, should have put more thought into this, or why didn't I know how to do these things? Am I lacking somewhere? But there's just so many different options, and if nothing else, always remember there's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say. Okay, and I think this is the last example I have, which for me is one of the biggest, and that is what I started off with, which is sometimes the simplest seeming things can be the biggest roadblocks, okay? There is probably nothing scarier to me. I don't know if anyone else, as a newcomer can attest to this. There's almost nothing scarier than seeing this black screen command line right there, okay? And what do you do with it? How does it work its magic? You put a command in, it doesn't work, and everyone tells you, right? You gotta learn to get on the command line. Forget the user interface. You gotta, learn it the real way. And I took that to heart. But it's one of the technologies, and I have an entire blog post on this where I literally just went through and explained how I did, get init to all the way to pushing it to GitHub and all this sort of thing, just to really get that idea in your head. So the key point here is, as you may notice, another very vague example, REST and APIs. And these are things I say only because they come up in like the mock interview questions and things like this, and I don't doubt that people truly ask those things at jobs, and it's important to know. But again, as a newcomer, they're the things that can easily be kind of expected for you to intuitively understand. They're mentioned a bunch of times, and it's as if you just know what it is out of nowhere, because at its heart, something like an API, right? It is a simple concept. It's almost so broad that it should be very simple. But just know that a lot of people first learning it, you can sit there and hear API, you can actually have experience with it, you can do a lot of things and still not fully grasp that concept. So that's point one to the veterans about explaining these things, or at least just knowing that they appear far more daunting than they really are, and to the newcomers that it's important when you hear a term a lot of times, and I use the last example, not as Node.js, the technology, but literally just the term node. I mean, I went through so much hearing that term bandied about, and oh, it's this node, that node, and not until I actually got back into some computer science principles and was learning like linked lists, did I really realize what node actually meant, okay? So sometimes these ideas, they're just kind of glossed over, and it seems like all is well and good. You can understand it enough to actually like write code that does this, right? You can build a RESTful API sometimes, but do you really understand the purpose of it? Would you be able to, again, to go back to the first example I gave with Redux, could you really explain why that's more valuable than any other type of API? Okay. And a final word, if any of this sounded as if it is a daunting field, well, it truly is, but remember, and here I think my experience has only emboldened me to speak this way, which is don't be fearful just because you see the guy who can write the function in one line that took you 20. Or don't be fearful that you see people building all this awesome software out there and you're merely recreating something, just trying to, get your feet wet a little bit. Instead, get inspired, right? I went to the hackathon that Palm Beach Tech put on last month, and I was amidst incredible minds, incredible skilled coders, okay? And it was very daunting. And you often think, what do I have to offer, and how can I even hold a candle to a lot of these coders? But when you see some of the things they created, it's insane. Like just thinking that, I was proud enough to have built a complete project with my team, and then seeing all the other teams present, it was like, wow, just think what you can create when you really know this stuff and you learn over the course of several years. That should be empowering, not intimidating. You know, don't be scared just because someone is ahead of you in that regard, but actually think about what you have the potential to do with these skills. Okay.
But also, you know,
Nice.
just think about the context too. It's like you're more advanced than someone else before you, or coming into the industry as well. So it's like there's this sliding scale of like, I always think someone is better than me, but then there's always someone behind me who's looking up to me thinking that they're better than I am. So it's like, if you take that concept of like more advanced, or they're smarter than me, or anything like that, and just get to the point of like, this is what I know how to do, you'll be fine. Because again, everybody's on different spectrums in this realm.
And as a final point to that, and I've heard plenty of veterans saying this already, we talk about imposter syndrome. We talk about, because just think about that feeling, right? I gave the example.
First, define imposter syndrome for the news. Does anybody know what imposter syndrome means?
Tell us, Fred.
It really comes to psychology. So it's pretty much saying that you suck at something when in reality you're good at it. That's the basis of what imposter syndrome is.
So it's your constant feeling of inadequacy based on emotion instead of actual facts.
Well, Fred, let me ask, how did you feel when you heard the answer?
Oh.
You always get that thing, just like the imposter right there stepping out in the group.
I mean,
is this right?
I mean, I actually looked this up heavily, so I was pretty confident with my answer. Now, when it comes to coding, on the other hand, that's where I'm just like, I get what you're saying. I currently experience imposter syndrome as well. I'm building a website right now, and I feel like the website could be better. And I guess that's everybody here. They always feel like something can always be done to better the website, one way or another. Whether it's loading speed, design, functionality, there's always something you could do to be better, but you don't have time to do it.
No, but it's also Jeremy just got me on this lunchtime, right? Where I was telling him, geez, I feel like I'm doing it. It was the same thing. I walked in this morning. It happened to me this morning. And I'm like, holy smokes, I should know this. I'm a Node developer. How in the world do I not know this? And at the end, I stood up and I'm like, I'm a fucking Node god, because I got this working. But at the beginning, I was like, how do I not know this? How is this not working? What's going on here?
It's a roller coaster.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
The best way to kick yourself when you miss a few quotes, or you're off by HTTP file path. That's the greatest way to kick yourself.
And I stand before you all, the greatest imposter here, right? Who am I to be, talking to all of you, seasoned veterans and newcomers alike, about, what I know about the field? But once again, you start to realize that your experience is valuable, and to go along with the, imposter syndrome mentality, it's just something you got to get used to in this field, right? You're never going to know everything. And it's all the more reason why you should never feel intimidated to step out there just because you don't know everything. You don't know it perfectly, right? I mean, I designed a lot of these slides with those code examples, right? And I'm still like thinking to myself, oh, maybe I made like a small error and one of these guys is gonna look at it and realize like that wouldn't even run or something, right? So I sit there and like test it in the console. Like, you're always gonna have that sense that, you don't know everything perfectly. And it's all the more to realize that this field, more than any, is one where you just have to dive in and get that experience. And not only get that experience, but do it consistently, okay? The key word I hear from one of the YouTubers I watch is just code every day. And it's true. It's unlike any other field where sometimes it is better to gather all of your research and know everything before you put something out there. In this field, you're never going to get anywhere if you think you're going to learn everything about any of these technologies. So you got to try your hand sometimes before you feel ready when you're still an imposter. And on that note, experience really is the key. And I'll just talk about a couple of the examples real quickly about what I mean about getting out there, and me being a prime example standing before you. So congratulations, you've all taken the first step to getting out there, coming out to this meetup. You've identified and been introduced to Palm Beach Tech. You know, the meetups are here. Jeremy mentioned the Slack channel. We've got some, you know, I don't know who that guy is there, but you know, we've got some pretty awesome, you know, memes going on and things like that. So jump on in the chat. And again, don't, because I've done it, right? You feel like, oh, I don't even want to type out my response or my answer because I don't know anything. Just do it. And the awesome thing about this community, which is the next point, is they're always willing to help. Never once have I said anything or floated an idea or anything like that and just been like told it was a dumb idea or something like that, right? Everyone here is ready to help. I've never met a community that's, you know, as ready to help and as eager to help and really gets motivated by helping others. I mean, seriously, it's just
Not
awesome
like
spot.
Stack Overflow.
Okay, a great example, right? See, when you go online into that abyss, you get a much different feeling when you're amongst the community
Tech
here.
family, you're amongst friends.
There you
Not
go.
Stack Overflow
That's our
users.
motto. And I mentioned earlier, just to go off of that point, that find opportunities wherever you can, okay? I said that I'm a teacher, right? But I found ways in my unique situation that I was actually able to put things to the test. So my institution has a WordPress website, right? What did I know about WordPress? But I went ahead and volunteered my abilities and said, hey, can I help, you know, maybe add this extra page where we have an alumni page, or, you know, help do this thing or that on the page. And, you know, especially my director was like, sure, you know this stuff, please, by all means. So find opportunities where you can offer your skills. I even, I said I would wear many hats at my job, and I've gone a far way since simply being a history teacher, that they actually offered a computer science class as part of the distance curriculum. And I said, heck yeah, if someone wants to take that class, sign me up, I'll teach it. And what language was it in? Java. Did I know any Java? No. But now I do, and I learned, I learned what was necessary, and again, with the basic skills, with the concepts, I was able to, you know, help that student in that class, and it's incredible what you can learn. I mentioned the hackathon, okay? What better way than to figure out whether you are truly a coder at heart than to go somewhere, be locked in for 24 hours, not literally locked in, they keep the doors open, but you know, actually like locked into a project for 24 hours straight and know that you want to keep doing it, okay? You get to work as part of a team. That's incredibly valuable in this field, right? That was an experience I had never had, working with someone else on a project. And just like you all are doing here, you get to meet awesome people, okay? You would not believe the amount of coding collective brain power that was in that one building, where you can sit there and have conversations with these people who have so much value to offer you, okay? So definitely seek out these opportunities. I know what it's like to think, oh, but I can't do anything at a hackathon. What do I know? I know just these skills. Believe me, just go, do it. It's awesome. I can completely vouch for it now that I've actually done it, okay? See pics or it didn't happen. There you go. So that's an excellent experience. And finally, something I did, I've alluded to this already, but I started a blog. There's, it can be a YouTube channel if you want to start one. It can be anything to document your progress in this field. You also learn new skills while you're at it. This blog I have was built on WordPress. Again, you learn WordPress as you go along. It gives you another skill, and again, things that can become empowering. I remember when I first figured out how to add the new CSS in there, and I put those links up there and things like that, and I just thought, wow, I've unlocked this awesome new thing. Now just think of all that I can do with this. It really is awesome. And as you can see here, I blogged about my experience. I like to use kind of pun-oriented titles, so event handling, talking about all the events there, but I also post a lot about my experience in the bootcamp. Learning React has been the last few posts I've done as well. So sometimes there's no better way, Jeremy already mentioned, than to teach something, than to actually learn it, okay? So again, don't ever feel mystified by the fact that you don't have enough experience and you don't have something to offer. And as I said, if time permits, I'll go ahead and show you two things. One is this list of just a few of the said YouTubers I mentioned in Udemy courses, so anyone who wants this, I can absolutely give you a few of my recommendations as well. And as promised, I just wanted to show you my React capstone here. So this is called Apply Yourself. Again, I'm really big into puns. But this is about applying to coding jobs. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to build, I thought, well, the problem is literally right here in front of me. I'm learning to code, I'm gonna want to get a job, and it might be kind of difficult to keep everything organized. I remember applying for jobs in previous fields, and it can be such a nuisance to have each file of the correct version of the resume you sent, the correct cover letter, down to the date you sent it and everything like that. So I created an app to handle all of that in one single place.
If you have a picture of a MacBook Pro there.
Oh, darn it. It's inevitable.
It was the only free picture.
I was just going to say, the royalty-free stuff is so biased, isn't it? Oh, and of course it's going to cause me difficulties in the live. What was the question? Oh, sorry. That was a slow reaction there. Okay. So this is just the demo account here that I set up just to show you. What you have here is a dashboard of all the jobs you've applied to. Okay. I personally find it, useful to have something to match a job with. So I created the idea where you can upload a company image as well. But if you don't want to, you get a little default image here as well. Any of these jobs you can sort by either the stage you're at, which I'll show you in a second, is based on checkpoints that you can complete in your job search. So you can go from highest to lowest stage. You can search by priority. If you're prioritizing a certain job, you can assign it a priority and focus on those ones that you want the most. And then you can actually view statistics based on the jobs you have that show you what your average job progression is. They show you what desired skills keep popping up, so you can enter what skills each job wants, and it'll show you what's most common. So I need to learn some PHP apparently. And then you can look at the number of jobs that you have at each stage. So if you were finding that you never got past the coding challenge, maybe that's a skill you need to focus on, is being able to complete coding challenges. And finally, break it down by style. So if you're applying to startups, enterprise, nonprofits, contract positions, and then see whether or not your prioritized jobs are actually matching if you're focusing on those enough. So what you'd want to see is actually a line like this so that your priority 10s are actually the furthest along. So in this case, that's not quite the scenario. So I would want to get on like these jobs over here to make sure I'm fulfilling the highest priority. It's cool.
Yes, sir.
But
And
yeah, so
Monster just bought you for $6 million, I see on Twitter. Very nice.
Yeah. So absolutely, it is live. So if anyone would find this useful, you can also get to it on my blog website right here, as I just showed you, devdigression.com. And I'm sure you all have about had it hearing me talk, so I will end it there. And if there's any questions or anyone,
Thank you.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah, so you're currently a web developer, or you're finishing up your boot camp and you teach?
I teach full-time and I'm finishing up my boot camp. Okay. So I have not done any work professionally yet, but I am on the market, as they say.
Have you started your search?
Not officially, but I'm open to any and all opportunities. And as I reach the end of the boot camp, I know they really push you to build a more complete portfolio. So what I have here on my blog is actually just my projects themselves that I've built so far. But I'll build a much more tidied up portfolio by the end of the program and really start. So again, if you want to check out any of my work as well, devdigression.com, you can see my other projects as well. All my social media and whatnot. I've also got business cards if you're into that thing. Anyone is welcome. But I humble myself before you all.
Nice.
Well, why can't you just make 10 louder?
10 louder?
Oh, jeez.
That's the quote from
Instead
the
of
movie.
cranking it up to
Yeah,
11.
exactly.
Exactly. No one's figured that out yet. Maybe it needs more cowbell.
Any other questions?
So what did you apply yourself for? Was that something you did yourself, was working on it, or you?
Yeah, so that was actually my capstone for the boot camp. So you're supposed to build an app that uses the MERN stack, so that uses, of course, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but you also use MongoDB, Node and Express, and then React. So this program itself is built with all of these technologies you see here. On the front end, I did actually use Redux in my project. And then you also learn some testing on the side, so I use things like that, and then deploying it with, it's actually, the server is hosted on Heroku, and the front end is actually at Netlify.
What's the domain for that site? That's not a site that you've actually launched out in the world to see what the world thinks. Is that something that you just kind of have in your portfolio so you can get to it through your blog or you just get to it through the URL?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to get to the live version, you can go to apply yourself, that's with a hyphen, apply-yourself.netlify.com. Or you can go to my blog and click on it.
Regular website, apply-yourself.com. www.
Oh, sure. So like a paid hosting site.
Why do you make the business and you're trying to sell yourself? You're trying to sell web development, but why don't you sell that product there yourself? Just so that can make some money.
Perhaps you have more confidence in me than I do. That's
I
excellent
like
idea.
that.
That's imposter syndrome right there.
Yeah.
The concept, I like the idea. Why is it not just a domain? You should get it from my blog.
I think it's
Go on my
temporary.
blog, you're like, you should just get a business. That sounds like a business.
Sure, and I'm happy to hear that, and that's an excellent idea. So perhaps in the future that would be my plan. I actually just finished this like a couple of weeks back, so I can definitely look into that, absolutely. My time is definitely still occupied learning the computer science part of the boot camp, but definitely when all that is said and done, I'll be looking into all of it. Thank you, thanks, I really appreciate your comments.
Two things, as far as resources, lynda.com, Lynda, they're bought out by Microsoft and you get a free membership from the local library. They tend to have pretty good coding tutorials. They stay up to date as well. And to second, FAU you went to, I noticed in your presentation, you listed the pros and cons, and it seemed somewhat of a negative experience for you. I was there undergrad and graduate level as well. I took in the college computer science and engineering graduate level courses. I noticed that at the graduate level, there's a little bit more leeway to do projects that you're passionate about or that are more up to industry standards. But I do agree with you as far as the undergraduate level, that's where you were at.
Yep.
Yeah, that they kind of, exactly as you described, restrict you, mainly not the latest tech, but definitely at the graduate level I found that you have that leeway, so don't write off FAU.
But to be fair, it is a computer science degree, it's not a web development degree. And I think you would agree that those two things are different, right?
Oh, 100%, absolutely, and that was a big part of my learning. Like I said, I didn't learn a thing that I didn't appreciate and didn't use in some way. It just simply wasn't what I was looking for, which was a quick way to get my foot in the door, get my hands dirty in the code. But absolutely, I can completely vouch for FAU. I went there for both of my first degrees, excellent faculty and everything. It was nothing about the courses themselves, just merely the method of learning and my particular state in life. So like I said, if you are inclined to go to the CS program, and especially if you're going to college for the first time, absolutely, I completely recommend it.
Cool. We had a question in the back there. You had a question there?
This isn't necessarily a question, but you should buy the Apply Yourself. Is today and .online are available.
Nice.
.coms are gone.
Oh, wow.
Scoop them up now.
This brand new .com, don't do it. Don't do it. Always .co, brand new .com. Think of the brand, take your time. I'm sorry, it's not a bad idea to buy it for me, and I agree. I just get a .com and brand it something that makes sense. Think about it. Take your time. That's your ticket, bro. That's a good idea.
Awesome, thank you.
You know what I mean? Like, the fact that you're having to throw that out there and just marketing it online with some, like, Quora or, like, third-party links, maybe some organic search. It's a good concept. That'll catch some viral. You'll pick up some speed with that. But yeah, there's no name brand.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad to hear all that, and I will definitely put more effort in there.
So
Thank you for your
I've got a
confidence.
question to the group. As a collective, for all the senior people out here and all the new people out here, can we get rid of the 5 and the 3 on HTML and CSS already? Like, is it just like we know it's HTML5 and CSS 3, like in general. Not saying that you're doing it wrong. It's just everybody's like putting it out there. It's like I'm just like chop HTML and CSS. Can we all agree on that collectively? For one, okay, cool.
I have a T-shirt. It says HTML5. I can't get
As
it.
long as people know, like I said before, they know not to look at the older versions. Absolutely.
But it's time to let that T-shirt go. It's got to be from what, 2009?
It was a while ago, yeah.
Two things that I wanted to follow up on. You mentioned like the MDN docs. The Mozilla Developer Network is a great place to go. Bathroom reading or something. It is something that I use on a daily basis to try to figure out this new technology, or like dive deep into it. The first a couple times I've looked at it, it was overwhelming. But the more I went back to it, it started clicking and the examples started helping. So Mozilla Developer Network has done a phenomenal job. They're not doing things specific for their platform. It's JavaScript in general, and it's a couple of collective people outside of the Mozilla network that are contributing to this. So this is the de facto JavaScript documentation, and they're trying to be the de facto documentation for other places. So take a stab at it. You might understand the documentation because they try to very hard make it as human readable as possible instead of all of the geek speak. And then to further his point about going back to the basics and understanding, the beauty of understanding the basics is it helps inform your decision on what frameworks to use, right? Because a lot of times they're framework wars, like use Bootstrap, no, use Foundation, no, it's React, Vue, Redux, Backbone,
Angular,
Knockout, just the list goes on and on and on. So understanding the fundamentals really helps you identify the frameworks and the problem that it's trying to solve, and you can make a more informed decision that that framework is solving the problem that you're trying to code for. So basics is key, and then layer on the framework. So those are the 2 points that I wanted to add on to that. Don't be afraid to MDN and learn the basics. As well, Frank, Fred, Oscar, whatever his name is today, put in the Slack channel the slide that he had for what paths to go down as well. In the Slack channel, I also posted. There's another one from LearnCode.academy, a YouTube channel, where he breaks it down. It's a nice 20-minute video or so going through all of that stuff as well. So I highly recommend checking that out. And I didn't mention this before, but we have a sponsor now, $25 gift card. Ooh. So you guys all have had a raffle. Anybody not get a raffle ticket? You got a raffle ticket.
Hey Mike, I just posted a link.
Technically, we should get 3.
Exactly. Technically, you should get 3. So last time, the first meetup of this year, I talked about GreenSock, the animation platform, and
That's neat.
This is utilizing the technology from them, where I have listed out everybody's numbers from here, and then we have a nice random button up here. If you want to check it out, the Slack in the Slack channel is this link here. Go look at the code.
Excuse me, Jeremy, on Boca.js, we do this on everybody's phone. Is there a reason why we don't do that here?
Yes, because I didn't present that. So, everybody got their tickets handy?
No, I didn't get a ticket.
Woo!
Oh, I got that. No. I saw 6. I saw 6. I did see a 6, is
They
it?
built that in.
5, 5, 5.
Oh, come on, 3 shots.
Who's got it?
Yay! $25 Amazon.
Yep, $25
Amazon.
gift card.
I'll give you $20 for it right now.
Check out the Meetup Notes. That's our sponsor. I don't remember who they are off the top of my head, but they do Angular training. They can come to you, or they can provide you online resources and they can tailor it based on your company's needs. So a team of 3 to 30, they can train you up on Angular and why it's the best thing in the world. It's
So-
nuts for you, by the way.
So if you didn't see the link, just go to meetup.com/Palm Beach Tech. Palm Beach JavaScript, sorry.
Wait. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to talk about,
And the
you guys
sponsors
don't know
there.
about our podcast we have. It's called Bang Important. We've got 3 episodes up there, and we're going to be doing some more tonight and next Tuesday. So it looks like we're going to be having 2 a month. All things web development, and more. We get deep in one of these conversations up in here. So bangimportant.com, and the last thing is
Dun, dun, dun.
YouTube.
Go to YouTube. Yeah.
Hey everybody, this is
so I'm not going to play this,
absolute
but this is the a similar thing that he built. Just another resource out there to. I encourage you guys not to find all of your information from one resource. Look around, get other people's opinions and multiple opinions, and formulate your own opinions from that multiple resources. So Learn Code Academy is one of my things I would add to your list of YouTube channels. Okay. All right, everybody, thanks for coming out.
Check out CSS Tricks.
Yeah, it's good.
CSS Tricks is a good one too. Check out.
When you did your boot camp, were there different tracks? Children, concentrate on that, or was it just one?